I think Grace is hitting that record button as we speak. So as we have this idea of going from proof of concept to production, it's a really important thing for us to be thinking about in terms of blockchain. And I guess I'll be taking you through a lot of this and leading you through it. My name is Rob Dawson. I'm the product lead at PegaSys. And I'm joined by Joshua Fernandez, who's a blockchain protocol engineer. Joshua will be taking us through later some demos of some of our monitoring support that we have in PegaSys, which is a very important part of making sure that you've got a really good working production system. Before we begin, I can see, and it looks like everyone's on mute, which is great. Please do remain on mute and submit questions via the chat. We will share our contact information at the end of this deck, and we'll be emailing you throughout afterwards as well. And so please do contact us to learn more information as well. If we think about PegaSys, as I was already starting to hint, we think that going to production is really important, and we take that really seriously. And so we've got the work that we've been doing around Ethereum and Enterprise Ethereum. We're a group that works with Consensus. We're members of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance and the Hyperledger group, and creators of the Hyperledger Besu underlying Ethereum client and the PegaSys Plus tooling on top of that. We've got a 70+ member team, so a great team working on both the production development of this, doing research into the next generation Ethereum technologies, and also research into how to make things work really well in enterprises. Our mission is to be building that enterprise Ethereum platform, to be making sure that it works really well in production, and to drive those collaboration and the next generation innovation, making sure that Ethereum works really well in enterprise environments. So given with that background, it's worth diving into some of our material. So we'll be looking at some of the challenges and things around blockchain and enterprise, where we are right now. Some of those, again, looking into the details of where some of those challenges in taking blockchain in production can be. Looking at some of the successes and ways that PegaSys can really help make you succeed, and finishing off with some case studies and conclusions. So with our background, I'm sure many of the people on this call will know that businesses actually are seeing the compelling business case for blockchain, and that there is real value in using blockchain to solve problems. That's great. 74% of large executives from this survey were saying that, yes, we do think there's value in blockchain. The problem that can be a little bit there at the moment is some of the drop-offs in that. And this is what PegaSys is sort of seeing in the market, and what we're trying to solve is the challenge of going from this large number of people that see the compelling business case to dropping down to, hey, there's only 34% then initiating the deployment of a blockchain solution, and then only 10% are seeing that it's made to production. And so within PegaSys, we're working to ease some of those challenges that are there in going to production, and ensuring that it is easier. And hopefully, as we talk today, we'll start to see some of these ways that we help that. There's also, I guess, sort of helping to give that background and flavor why this is important. You can see some of the challenges and barriers to investment and barriers to going to production. So this is a selection from a wider range survey that was done by Deloitte. And so some of the top things that we were seeing here that we really want to highlight is just that implementation cost. So the way of building a blockchain solution and thinking about it is different to a traditional solution. So having to replace and adapt your legacy systems and make them work in well with it is one of the challenges that's there. The risks around security and thinking about how you do things to ensure that your sensitive information and competitive information is kept private, and all those sort of areas are some of the challenges that sit there. And of course, there are people that are moving forward to production now and moving forward with systems. And so it is exciting to know that people are not seeing some of these barriers and have found some of the solutions that are there. And so as we go through these slides, I'd like to keep some of these ideas in the back of your head as we go through this, and we'll be touching on, again, the things that PegaSys has to help address some of these barriers. We look very closely then at this challenges and why projects do unfortunately fail to achieve production today, and some of the challenges that are there now. There's three areas that we're going to be looking at. The first is that some people misunderstand or misuse blockchain. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the ways that you can sort of think about blockchain and think about how you can ensure that you're trying to solve the right problems. The next area is thinking about the security needs and some of the misalignment that you can have between things that a database does really well, things that a blockchain does really well. Again, it's all about that, getting the right tool for the job, and using blockchain when it really does solve the problems that you have, and making sure that you're using the right solution there. And the final area, which I think is one of the big areas and the big things that PegaSys is distinctly solving, is the non-functional requirements, making sure that operationally your blockchain solution works well. So if we look at the misunderstanding or misusing blockchain, I think the big sort of thing here, and this is something that I think many of you will know, is that you need to think about does the problem that you have really require a blockchain? If you only have a single party that's involved in a system with centralized governance, which doesn't have any censorship requirements, with privacy, then hey, that feels very much like a traditional database. Those are things that a traditional database does well. Don't use a blockchain. I feel bad for being a part of a company that is all about blockchain, is saying there's not a solution for everything, but it's true. I mean, there's definite places where you want to use a blockchain, some places where you don't. There's situations where you want to use a public blockchain, and we think that the future will be very much around using the public sort of mainnet in some form or another. And then there's the next sort of set of solutions where there's the permission chain. So this is one sort of set of questions that you can use to help think about it. There are many, many different sort of flow diagrams and charts which help you think about how to go from, should I really actually be using a blockchain for this problem? Is it really what we need to have? And I think it's really worth making sure that you do that as you are embarking on a problem, and asking the question again when you're at that sort of starting point of thinking, okay, yep, we think we need a blockchain. Do we really? And really sort of questioning that well to make sure that you're using the right tool for the job. I'll pause for questions.
Does anyone have any questions? I haven't seen any come through the chat, but feel free to ask them now. You can share. Doesn't look like anything's coming through, Rob, so I think we're okay to move on. And friendly reminder, we will be sharing the materials and the recording afterwards. So if you missed something or want to go back, you will be given that in the next 24 hours about when we send them out. But Rob, keep going.
Great, and I will also be pausing at various points throughout to give you more opportunities to ask questions. So next area and question around why projects fail production is thinking about that misalignment between the database and security needs. So I think we need to think of it again, this idea that there are things that a database does really well and things that a blockchain does really well. We've got this sort of highlighted here in this idea of tamper resistance versus surveillance resistance. So tamper resistance, not being able to change things, is a blockchain's real strength. You can see sort of that idea that there's this immutable ledger. It's got the large number of people doing the validation or proof of work sort of mining. It's mirrored on a peer-to-peer network across like the large number of computers worldwide, a mainnet blockchain is very tamper resistant. It's hard to change something. Once a record has been written, once a transaction has been written, once a block has been mined, it's hard to change the data that is written there. If we look at a traditional database, you can have your admin user that's able to log in then to that traditional database, and a super user can then change anything that's been written to the database before. And so a mainnet blockchain does an excellent job at tamper resistance. That's the weakness of a traditional database. We look then at the idea of surveillance resistance. So that idea of being able to hide what is information as being there. That is the absolute strength of a traditional database. You can have your relational database sort of firewalled off in the secret room, sort of Mission Impossible style, where you need to like use all your secret codes to be able to get into the room, and it's only the people that are able to get into that physical machine are able to get access to it. So you think about that surveillance resistance, it's really hard for someone who's not authorized to be able to get into that room and get into that information. We think then about the sort of mainnet blockchain. It's the opposite side of the mainnet blockchain. The transactions are written and publicly viewable by everyone. So we have these two different ideas there that are sitting there. That idea of tamper resistance, which is definitely the strength of a blockchain, and surveillance resistance, which is the strength of a database. So if you're doing something that wants to have surveillance resistance, it's not, and you don't have that sort of strong tamper resistance requirement, it's probably not a situation where you want to be jumping straight to a blockchain. If you have a bit of a mix of requirements, then you want to be using maybe tools on top of that mainnet blockchain. The other spot where it starts to get interesting as well is thinking about this in terms of consortiums and those sorts of scenarios. So a consortium, you start to get some of that tamper resistance that's there, and you start to get more of the surveillance resistance as well. So it's sort of moving across to that, for people who are used to those magic quadrants, it's starting to move across to that top right quadrant. So a consortium, and particularly with the Hyperledger Besu offering, there's the ability to control who gets access to connect into the consortium. So it starts to get some of that surveillance resistance protection there, while still keeping a lot of that tamper resistance. It's not as strong as the public mainnet, but it's still within that consortium. You'll have multiple validators that are helping to ensure that you are not able to change what's been written to the chain. And then the next thing that sort of gets layered in for the PegaSys offerings is this idea of a privacy group. So a privacy group lets you ensure that the private transactions are only distributed to the participants in the privacy group. And so it's not shared with everyone in the consortium, definitely not shared with everyone in the world, which is where the sort of mainnet sort of scenario starts to happen. So it's a lot more restricted access to that information. So you start to get a lot more of that ability to hide and protect your information. So thinking about that in terms of, I guess, the overall thinking about how this works, and thinking about this security here, it starts to ensure that you're providing the tools to make sure that your blockchain project can then succeed. And then you're getting these ability to layer in these security concerns to make it successful in a production world. Another area for thinking about security, and the classic thing that comes back to me from my history is, and university days, and the things that gets taught to you when you're learning about security, is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability triad. So making sure that you're keeping your data secure, that you're ensuring that the data that is there is accurate, the integrity of your data, and the availability of your information longer term. So as we think about this in terms of blockchain, we think there's two sort of areas to start with when you think about the data in flight side of confidentiality. So that privacy, being able to protect and hide the information, and permissioning, controlling who is actually authorized and able to participate in the chain, and being able to control the actions that are being done as well. And so we have within the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, these privacy and permissioning requirements are really well specified and being fleshed out. Within the Hyperledger Besu and PegaSys Plus products, then we also have excellent support for then these privacy and permissioning concerns. And they're the important things to think about with your blockchain solution is how am I thinking about protecting my data? How am I controlling who has access to it? Continuing to think then around those privacy side, there's two different rules in blockchain world that you start to think about. So on-chain transactions, so being able to use cryptographic techniques to encrypt private data and store it on the ledger. So that's your zero knowledge proofs, your ZK Starks, bullet proofs, range proofs, all of the cryptographic tools that are available to help you protect information. And so we have a privacy group inside of PegaSys that are experts in that are diving into the details of those cryptographic tools and techniques. And we have some things then within the PegaSys Plus and sort of offerings around there that help make this work really well. The next area there to think about is the off-chain transactions. And so that's being able to use, instead of storing your private transaction, the full private transaction on chain encrypted, you maybe store a marker that there was a private transaction and only distribute that private transaction to the people involved in it. So these are the off-chain transactions, and these ideas of on-chain and off-chain privacy is something that is fleshed out well in the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. So these ideas of on-chain and off-chain, both of which are very important tools to use when thinking about confidentiality and your privacy solutions, both of which are provided inside of the PegaSys offerings. Another area for thinking about confidentiality is your data at rest. And so to support that, if you're thinking about your private permissioned type network, you're going to have all the tools for encrypting the data as it comes in. You're going to have tools for encrypting the data as you share it around. You also want to encrypt the data while it's being stored at rest. And so by doing that, you're ensuring that the data is not providing a new attack vector for people to be able to I guess, hack into your machine and mine that data out. So that's a feature that has been added to the PegaSys Plus offering, this idea of database encryption to ensure that the state information is kept encrypted and secure there as well. The next area to think about around that CIA kind of triad is around the integrity of the information. And one of the key areas that we think about is the immutability of it and how we make that happen. So there's two areas that sort of stand out there. The first is, this is one of the strengths of a blockchain. So when you think about the core sort of tenet is that you are storing on the chain these immutable transactions that are the record of what's happened. And so in thinking about that in a blockchain sense and in a Ethereum sense, we've got this really great immutable list of transactions that have happened that are being distributed out there for people to be able to see on that peer-to-peer network. The thing that we can start to layer in to help ensure that it gets even better is thinking about the key management around that. And so ensuring that the transactions that are written are actually being written by the person that they really are. And so keeping those keys well managed is a really important part of it. So when I think keys and think about key management, people will often talk about your wallets for doing that as well. And so I think having a good solutions around that is really important. And so we've within PegaSys, we've created the product ETH signer to really help with that and ensure that we do that. So if we look some more at this sort of integrity, that blockchain, as we look at that, there's that strong data integrity, that we get that that full history and data trail that's there. We get that auditing and proof of fault sort of features. So again, these are some of the key things when you think about a blockchain. Integrity is one of the things that it does really well. And on that key management sort of side, the component that we have inside of PegaSys to help with that is ETH signer, for really hooking into that that key management in a organizational sort of setting where you already have all those different tools in place and helping to make sure that it fits in well. The ETH signer is definitely a component for helping to ensure that you get that really good quality key management in place, which is an important part of making sure that your identity and the transactions that you're sending are really from an authorized person. We think about that security triad. So going back to it again, we've got that confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So thinking about our availability, there are two sort of spots that we want to really dive into here. So looking in at the availability of data redundancy. And so if you think again, touching on a blockchain, for things that are written to a public chain or to a consortium chain, the public transactions that are there, we get that data redundancy built in. And that's one of the great things about a blockchain. One of the challenges though can be thinking about, okay, so in terms of the extra components that you bring in, ensuring that they still keep those. We've got our off-chain transaction manager, Orion, which we've been ensuring has the right tools to enable the traditional high availability techniques to be used. And so as a part of thinking about your blockchain solution and where things might go wrong on the security front, making sure that you are considering this CIA triad, making sure that you are having the appropriate confidentiality controls in place, making sure that you are doing the right things around the integrity of your information, and doing the right things to make sure that you keep the availability of your data. And I will pause here for questions again.
So we have a couple of really great questions. So we'll start at the top and keep going through a couple of them. First one is from Mohammed. Do you think ledger databases such as Amazon QLDB that are owned by a central trusted authority will be attractive for businesses for certain use cases? Do you know of any major drawbacks of these type of databases?
So I think, again, it's you want to have a variety of tools available to you. And so I think that using a more centralized approach can be a tool that's useful. It does have the drawback of not having quite as much of the decentralization that's there. You then do end up with a lot more of the vendors sort of lock-in and dependence on those trusted vendors, which maybe is a environment that works well for you. It might be something that you don't want to tie yourself to as strongly. So there's that kind of classic trade-off that's sitting there. But I do think that it is an option that can be really valuable and useful to use.
Great, good answer and good question. Next question from James is, what industries or businesses are you seeing adopt blockchain here? I think we highlighted some of it with consortium.
Yep. So we're seeing a number of use cases. One of the strongest use cases that we're seeing is just that general tokenization sort of approach, and particularly on the Ethereum platform. There's a sort of wide ecosystem of things that really help with the tokenization of assets. So those might be, I guess, the financial instruments, I guess equity stocks in those sorts of spaces, moving across to maybe things like a real estate or sort of fractional ownership of real estate, and then moving through to I think some of the ones that were highlighted, so the food safety, the supply chain type use cases. I started to see some interest in health as well, but I guess with an awareness that sometimes health is understandably a cautious domain, and so but there's definite use cases in there as well.
Oh, those are a lot of great examples. We have a couple of questions about off-chain transactions that you kind of hinted at when you were talking about Orion, but I'm going to lump them together and maybe just go over it one more time. From Jordy, off-chain transactions alter the state of the ledger for those parties involved in the transaction. At which point are those transactions recorded in the ledger? And then the second one is, how does PegaSys support authentication for off-chain interactions?
Yep. Okay, so I'll answer the first one first, and then I might get you to repeat the second. So the first one, in terms of the off-chain transactions for PegaSys, what gets written to the public ledger is a hash of the transaction, and so that record is available for everyone to be able to see. The private transaction is distributed to those private participants, and they will have their own sort of shared state that is kept for that privacy group that is involved in the transaction. So hopefully that gives a little bit of a hint. We've done a webinar before which goes into details of our sort of privacy solution, and so I think it's well worth watching that to get a better flavor for those details.
Perfect. And then the second part of the question, or second off-chain transaction question, is how does PegaSys support authentication for off-chain interactions? And I think you touched on that Orion is what does it.
Yep. So I guess there's two parts of it. So there's the identity side is really important. And so when thinking about it, we have the identity that's used to send that private transaction, and so that's one sort of spot that it ties in. And then there's another identity that's used within your Orion sort of private transaction manager, and so it will have that identity that's associated with it that's used to send and distribute that. And so I guess that authorization around and authentication piece is done very much through the public key cryptography and the mix of and actually very heavily through just the signing of transactions and signing of information.
Great. So let's maybe do 1 to 2 more, and then we'll move on. We're having a lot of great questions come in, but also want to get to the rest of the presentation. But we'll definitely stay on to answer all of them at the end too, if we don't get to them in the middle. But just 1 or 2 more. In the case of digital money use cases, do you think using a blockchain in a centralized mode by a company to leverage on blockchain properties and accelerators like token standards is a bad idea and better to use a traditional database?
So I expect actually in that sort of scenario, it might be a good idea to use it, I guess, mainly for the ecosystem that's around. It does still, I guess, help with some of those immutability of information and the various token standards and ecosystem that's around for supporting the blockchain type technologies begins to fit in pretty well. So it's likely could be a good tool to use.
Great. And then 1 more, and then I see there are a bunch of kind of interoperability comparison questions that we'll get to at the end. But from Manuel, do you think it is possible to apply a blockchain for whistleblowing in a company, or is it too powerful technology for that?
Yes. So I think that I guess there'd be the ability to keep that. I guess if you're a whistleblower that wants to keep track of when information's happened and start to keep track of some of the evidence that you might be creating for that, sure. I think the blockchain for recording at least the hashes of documents and maybe even the documents themselves you could store on a chain and keep that repository of information that you want to have, and get that sort of idea of it's happened in the past, it's not something that I've been able to change, and getting that sort of immutable information there. I am not a lawyer, and so I don't know how that would stand up and what the sort of ramifications of that would be a bigger picture, and you'd need to talk to people much wiser than me in those sort of areas. But I think it could be that there would be potential for it to be a useful tool.
Great. I think we're okay to move on, and we'll answer the outstanding questions at the next break. Thanks.
Great. I'm sorry for jumping quickly there, but I'll keep moving through. So our next sort of area around why projects fail to achieve production is the non-functional requirements. So not considering all of those sort of operational areas. And the other areas can often be sort of, I guess, in the earlier phases of a project. Sometimes some of these non-functional requirements just get completely missed, and then you kind of, it's only as you actually get to production and deploying to production that you start to some of these areas. And so this is an area that we definitely are taking very seriously inside of PegaSys, and has been particularly over the past 6 months, been an area of heavy work for us, and is an ongoing area that we are taking very seriously. The first thing that I want to highlight is just that value of vendor support when you're going to a production environment. So getting that mix of onboarding, making sure that you're using software well and helping it to use it best. We provide that sort of support for onboarding, going from proof of concept to production. We work closely with our partners to help ensure that the roadmap for our product helps meet its future needs and is working really well. Another area that is really valuable in the vendor support that PegaSys offers is that technical support, and getting that support as you go, as your system is actually running in production as well. So it's that two sides of a vendor support that are really valuable. The first is doing that deployment story and getting to production. And then once you're in production, making sure that things keep on working and running well. When you think then around the running in production, it's also then having that strong idea around understanding what's happening with the blockchain solution, and making sure that you understand and know what's happening in real time with your environment. So there are a number of things that we provide to help do that. The first is we've added in support for event streaming. And so within that, we've got the ability to subscribe to the events within the blockchain. So traditionally, this has been done through in an Ethereum context. So looking at polling some JSON RPC APIs, or being able to use a WebSockets connection to connect in. And so one of the features that we've added to PegaSys Plus to help ensure more reliable message delivery is to add in event streaming. And so we've done this using supporting initially Kafka and Kinesis. We're also looking at some of the other tooling. So if you have a event system, event bus, a messaging system that is not Kafka or Kinesis, and it's valuable for you, we're going through our next round of prioritization of what systems to push our events to, and would love to hear more about that. So this event streaming, giving all these important qualities of reliable message delivery is really where it comes down to. So having that is a really important part of the PegaSys sort of offering there, and making sure that you're able to actually ensure that the events are available to you. The other area that's really important with being able to understand is getting the visibility into the actual underlying system. And so being able to understand, getting your DevOps and your infrastructure team the insights into the health of your chain. And so we'll be, I think, pausing now just quickly for Joshua to do a demo and showing our Prometheus and Grafana support, which is a set of tools for helping to understand that. So I've stopped sharing to hand to Josh, and he's going to give a quick demo of the monitoring support that we have. And I think it looks like Joshua might be talking, but he's on mute, and so he'll be coming off mute to make sure that we can all hear him. And I'll fill in some gaps. Here comes Josh now.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Rob. All right, so let me just share my screen. Okay. All right, so as Rob said, I'm Josh. I'm one of the members of the DevOps team. And what we'll do here is I'll walk you through some of the monitoring solutions that we offer. And I'll start by saying that this is something that we really recommend that you put in as your network is set up right from the beginning. Because this gives you some really good insights into how the network itself works, how both the nodes and the network work. It also ensures that you have a really professional, high-quality network that is reliable and stable, both now as well as when the chain grows in the long term. So we'll start by running through one of our production dashboards, and we'll talk about how we look at things to see if everything's okay. So just sort of like a quick status check when you have a really early morning webinar, and you kind of just wake up a few minutes earlier just to make sure everything's progressing well. So we'll start with that, and then we'll move on to some of the metrics, and we'll talk about how we use them as indicators to solve potential problems. So this is our main table dashboard, which we use. As you can see, there's all our production nodes over here. So we run them on pretty much every major network. And we've got goalie validators, mainnet, RINC-B, and Ropsten. And this particular one, the goalie validator, is very important because we need to make sure that this is always up. The network depends on us for this case. So what we like to see right off the bat is lots of green. Everything's humming along nicely. So things to take into account is the peer limit used. So we see all our nodes have connected to their max. There's blocks coming in on a fairly frequent basis, and none of our nodes are lagging behind. The next one is the fast sync progress. So when you start up a new node, this shows you the insight into the world state, how it progresses as the nodes come up to the chain head. We don't have any in here at the moment, but when we do, they automatically pop in here. So the next thing I'll talk about is the block time and blocks behind. This is really important for enterprises because, well, part of it is with this, the higher the number of peers, as well as you need to see that blocks coming in fairly frequently and nothing's left behind. This gives you strong confidence that as your chain grows, it's more stable. Okay, so with the block time, we'd like to see things, blocks coming in around about the 10-15 seconds, nothing sort of staying around the 1-2 minutes. Occasionally we do see things over there. So say, for example, when the Ropsten, has miners or nodes drop, we see things. But if they're constantly staying at the 2-minute mark, that's a red flag and something we should investigate. The blocks behind typically has spikes of maybe 2 or 3, depending on when they've been sampled. This is normal, not too bad. If they sort of start staying at 3 and above, that's really, really a bad thing, and we need to investigate and see what's going on over there. So the lovely thing about Prometheus and Grafana is it not just gives you insights into the metrics that BSIP provides. You can also put in exporters from the systems itself. So in this case, we've got a node exporter, which gives us insights into the disk usage, just to ensure that we don't run out of disk space. So everything's humming along nicely over here. no alerts have been triggered, and I'll touch on alerts in a few minutes. So the last thing that we really use as key indicators is the CPU and memory usage, as well as the garbage collection time. So what we like to see over here is this nice, steady, spiky kind of growth in both the memory and CPU. If we see a steady rise in things, that's a flag that something's not quite right, not quite working as expected, and something we should really look at. The other thing is, if you run out of memory, you'll see garbage collection getting kicked in quite a bit. It'll also cause a rise in CPU, and this is an indication that we either need to give the JVM process more memory, or we need to look at getting a different instance. So now I'll talk about alerts. So Grafana and Prometheus give you the native ability to create metrics, to create alerts, and you can version control them like you do other things. Private keys, for example, keep them nice and safe. But the lovely thing about this is, say you have something like block time over here, and you wanted to create an alert directly within the GUI, you can. So go into Edit, go into Alerts, you can create the alert, and you get to see sort of the query that's happening over here. So you can say, I want an alert to evaluate every minute, and when the average goes above, let's say, 60 seconds, that will trigger an alert. And so you see a nice little red line that pops up over here. And anything above this is obviously bad, anything below, nice and good. So all the alerts in Grafana and Prometheus, they can be trickled into Slack, PagerDuty, VictorOps, anything like that. But you can do simple things just like mail, and you can send them to self, various bits and pieces like that. So to do a quick recap, it's really important to set up monitoring so you get a good sort of overview and you get visibility into the network itself. And in the long term, this really ensures that you have a nice, stable network that is reliable as the chain grows, and you can keep developing apps. So I'll stop there and hand back to Rob.
Thank you, Joshua. And I think it's a great time to pause for questions. Before we do, just I guess another sort of comment there. I think the exciting thing with that sort of Grafana and integration is really that offering the alerting sort of support, and so being able to proactively know that things are beginning to go wrong is really useful for I think any sort of ops team, and that way you can sort of capture it before the customers do, and getting that insights before other people do is always a good thing, so you can fix it before anyone else sees any problems that might be appearing. And with that thought, I think that's a good time to pause for questions.
Great. So I think it makes sense. We have a couple of kind of comparison platform questions and a couple of feature specific questions. Let's start with a few of the platform comparison ones, and we'll go to some of the feature specific ones. I know we are running up on time. We're prepared to be on until the top of the hour. So we're just going to keep going if y'all are right. And if you have to drop, we will be sending the recording so you will get the answer to your question. Okay, let's start at the top. So the first one was on the enterprise front, what gives Ethereum blockchain an advantage over Fabric or Corda?
So I think there's, within the Ethereum chain, there's a few areas that sort of stand out. So the starting point is the public sort of chain that sits there. And so that mainnet is a strong feature that's there. I think that as the world evolves and moves forward with blockchain technology, I think that having a public mainnet is going to be really useful and an important thing that does prove to happen. And so I think that's a starting point, is that Ethereum has that technology which maps onto that public mainnet. The developer community that's around Ethereum, from that sort of the first sort of smart contract based community that's there, And because of that and the evolving world around it, we do have this really great large developer community that's there to support it. And then with that sort of mix of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance and the Enterprise Ethereum that's being standardized, that sort of gets that best of sort of both worlds, where you've got the sort of public chain that has all of these sort of mainnet sort of global sort of trust features, which are really important. And then being able to couple with that the working on an enterprise side and being able to transition from that smoothly from a more small kind of consortium type world to the large public internet.
Great. That's a good answer. Yes, the answer is many reasons, right? The next one, we kind of have a couple questions about, do we plan on the Hyperledger organization and how we interact with them? So do you see Besu interoperating with other projects in the Hyperledger ecosystem, such as Fabric? And another one we received was, can Besu be used instead of Explorer, Hyperledger Explorer?
So currently the Hyperledger Explorer component, we don't have specific support with that within Besu. It's one of the Hyperledger projects that I think does make sense for us to have some support for in the fullness of time. At the moment, I believe that my understanding of the Hyperledger Explorer is it's tied tightly to the Hyperledger Fabric project. But if that was to, I think it does make sense to use that kind of block explorer type tool on top of something like Hyperledger Besu. The other side there is we have a number of other sort of visualizations of block explorers that work well in Ethereum. And so we partner with Alethio to ensure that there's really good visualizations of the actual blocks and transactions, which is kind of a different view of the world to the things that we were looking at earlier, which is, I guess, getting that understanding of the overall health of the network. And so there's, I guess, multiple different metrics that make sense to monitor and to understand what's happening with your system. In terms of the overall, how does PegaSys and Hyperledger Besu fit in with the rest of the Hyperledger ecosystem? That's a good question and one that we're actively working through. I think we don't yet have a good story for how Besu and Fabric interop, but I do think that that's something that we are looking at, how to make sure that we are a good part of that greater Hyperledger ecosystem. And I expect over time there will be more and more interop between the different components.
So this is a really lovely segue, Rob, because we got several questions about benchmarking and how we have been doing that with Besu against other platforms such as Corda. And I think you could provide a better answer, but the first part of that would be Hyperledger Caliper and how we started to use that.
Yeah. So we've recently been working very closely with using the Hyperledger Caliper project and extending that to make sure that it works well with Besu. It's expected that in the next sort of months, we'll start to get some more public information around that benchmarking information. To date, it's been not as comprehensive as we would like, and we want to make sure that we're giving good reliable numbers and making those available. But we don't have those available for public consumption just yet, but expect to have that soon.
And we will, one thing to add to that is we are planning on publishing blogs and different information as soon as that's available. So Caliper and the results there are high on our list in the next, let's say, month or so when it's all finalized. We'll also be sharing that. So just stay tuned is the point. A couple of questions related to features that will be a good next bunch. Can you provide a real or a theoretical example of event streaming in use of a consortium type project, particularly where it's useful.
Yep. So the biggest use case there is when you're connecting into a enterprise system. And so I guess when you're building a blockchain solution, the actual blockchain part of it is normally a part of a bigger system with maybe some Web 2 sort of components, some server-side elements, and those sorts of areas. I think the things around that fit in well when you want to push that information and make sure that you're getting a reliable record of the transactions that are happening in your non-blockchain components. So being able to push those Kafka events and have another system that's listening to those events, and I guess just building those sort of enterprise type systems, having those event streams out makes it a really clean integration point. And so it's any time that you want to have reliable records of the transactions and informations that are happening on chain, being able to connect in via an event stream is a useful tool to have.
Great. And then one question about advanced monitoring is essentially what is the difference between what's offered in PegaSys Plus versus what is offered in Hyperledger Basic?
So the advanced things that are offered in PegaSys Plus are very much around the IBFT2 consensus mechanism. And so adding the extra ability to get insights into the status of the validators, the way that I guess the blocks are being signed. So it'd be useful for, I guess if you're running an IBFT2 system, to be able to understand if a validator has gone offline and is no longer available. So that's the sort of things that are available in that PegaSys Plus and that advanced monitoring. The core monitoring is everything that we are starting to see today. So it's the things about I'm not going to be able to list them all, but it's sort of available in the documentation. But things like being able to see if you're behind in terms of blocks, the timing of blocks, and those sorts of areas of information are all available in our core. And so yeah, so the advanced is very much around the IBFT2 consensus mechanism.
Great. And then I think the last one that we'll do right now is in consortia, we need a way to control when dApps are being pushed in. For example, preventing somebody from deploying CryptoKitties into enterprise blockchain. Does Besu provide additional control mechanisms?
Yes. So the account permissioning support that we have in Besu does provide that ability to control what kind of transactions are being submitted to the network.
I think that's all the questions we have in the chat right now. Maybe we can wrap up and then defer to any other questions the group might have. Or if I missed it, please repost and we'll add it.
Sure. And so I will quickly go through PegaSys Plus and then a couple of case studies. So PegaSys Plus, again, we've been sort of touching on this all the way through, but just to sort of sum it up quickly on a slide, it's based on Hyperledger Basic. It has the additional support for that scalability, some of the enhanced monitoring security, that strong vendor support, the event streaming functionality that we talked about. It's all of those sorts of things fit into our PegaSys Plus offering. I think one of the things to highlight and just touch on really briefly, because I could spend a while talking about it, but I don't want to, and we don't have time for me to at this point, is that future-proofed sort of section there. And so I think one of the fears that can happen at the moment is that what's going to happen when Ethereum 2 comes out? Is that going to completely change everything? Do I need to should I hold off on doing anything now because there's a new version of Ethereum that's coming? And I think one of the things that we have inside of PegaSys within our group is we've got the mix of the people that are building for Ethereum now, the advanced research work that's happening, and that mix is giving us this strong confidence that we're going to be able to ensure that what you build now will continue to work, and we will support you in any transition that might need to happen. And the expectation is that there should be a seamless transition, particularly in enterprise environments, from where we are now with the Ethereum and enterprise Ethereum to the sort of future state with some of the advanced things that are coming from Ethereum too. So I think that idea that PegaSys Plus and Hyperledger Besu have the technology that works great now and will continue to work well into the future. We talk quickly through a case study. So LiquidShare is a sort of financial use case, post-trade settlement infrastructure. It's got those sort of benefits of directly connecting investors and small to medium enterprises. With the blockchain being there, it gives that sort of great infrastructure for actually helping things to work and deploy faster and cheaper. Some of the things that they've been using, which are touch on some of the challenges that we've talked about earlier, those areas of security, privacy, ensuring that the system scales, that there's the performance. Another benefit that they found was being able to have that sort of full vendor support. So these are all the things that helped form a part of this successful deployment. I believe that there's more information about this and the LiquidShare on our website, and so there's a lot of sort of things that you can sort of dive down into deeper there. And being conscious with time, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. I'll quickly touch on the fact that it's not just that one vertical. It's sort of well spread, and so a few that sort of really stand out here. You can see there's a bit of a financial sort of bias, but it's also on that supply chain side as well. So some of the payments side, Zarex and IO Builders, both of which are sort of that payment side. So Zarex, a distributed settlement system, and the IO Builders with their B2B platform for euro-based payments. There's some of the capital markets examples that we see there, including LiquidShare. And there's a bunch of supply chain platforms that are building on top of Hyperledger Besu and PegaSys Plus as well. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavor that there's a wide range of verticals that are building things on top of PegaSys Plus and Hyperledger Besu, and gives you a feel that we do provide something and software that you can take to production. And I think that's our sort of take-home message, is that there are a lot of challenges with taking blockchain solutions to production. PegaSys and PegaSys Plus offers a great set of tools for helping you to do that. And we're very excited and happy to partner with people to help ensure that the appropriate blockchain solutions are taken to production. With that, I'll say thank you. Got my Twitter handles there. There's a PegaSys info at consensus.net is the great way to get in touch with us. And there's our website there, pegasus.tech. I believe we might have a little bit of time, and I can stay around for some more questions.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Sorry, I ran us down a little with the clock there. So, but yeah, we're okay to stay on for another minute or two. If anyone has any questions, you can feel free to speak up or also ask them in the chat.
And we should also add that we're very happy to take questions via email to that email address there. Please do send through your questions.
All right, going once. Yes, so we will be sharing the recording and the materials and email to all of the attendees shortly thereafter. Yes, and it'll be an email to you all, everyone who registered. So just check your inbox tomorrow. All right, I think we're okay. I'm going to stop the recording, and thanks for everyone's time.